so bad. It might be I might have some stuff going on.
That's all good. But anyway, guys, CFL football is here, and when the good football is here, with CFL, I had to call Frank Stanisci, David Morassutti, my press box pals from the Toronto Argonauts. Gentlemen, how are we feeling today?
Excited.
Pretty good, actually. We're I'm like itching. I'm like itching because football's coming. Football's coming.
I know, because like David, you and I spoke a couple weeks ago, right before, like right as camps are going in, right before the preseason, and then it's like we jump like 2 weeks, and it's like boom, football's here. It's kicking into full gear in motion. But there's been a lot of turnover this year, especially with the team we cover, Toronto. And I want to start with Frank, because obviously we haven't got his opinions yet. Like, when you look at this Toronto team in 2024, obviously, look, we don't expect the same 16-2 team we saw last year. But, like, if you had to pinpoint expectations or what you expect of the Toronto Argonauts, where do you lie with them?
For me, there have been a lot of changes, but that doesn't make this year any different than any other year before. There's always lots of change.
Yeah.
Maybe they've lost a couple more veterans, let's say, than they did last year or the year before that. So, their veteran leadership is going to be tested as far as who the new group of players are that are going to lead this team. But one thing that's been established with this Argo organization is that it seems every year they find new ways to find players that are able to win. And last year, of course, because of, the reason you say, 16-2 may not happen again. Well, 16-2 never happened before. So there's a good chance it might not happen again.
Yeah, I mean, in the CFL, we've come to understand that no roster can really stay the same, and turnover is a given. Like, if your team doesn't have turnover, it's either that the other teams didn't want your players, or your team is, or you got a smart GM that kind of did the multi-year plan rather than the year-by-year plan.
Yeah, I feel the same way. But when I look at this team, I think this year it's going to be more like, because from David, what we saw Friday night, I feel like there's a lot more questions on this team just about what the offense will be in the regular season setting. Because obviously we saw them play Hamilton second and third tier guys, the guys that were fighting for jobs and practice squad. But the one thing I'll say is, though, it looks like the defense hadn't missed a beat, even though the starters didn't play that much. They were out there, they were high flying the entire game. And even too, you do have those new additions to where my big question with the defense still lays in the secondary. But all in all, I feel like they still have enough cohesion back there to keep it all together and have a good football team. Just because, like, I look at, like, I'm watching some CFL stuff in the background, and everyone has, like, Hamilton and Montreal above Toronto, to where I still think this is a team competing for a Grey Cup in 2024. And who knows? Do they want to party with the Jonas Brothers? Maybe.
For me, look, the Chad Kelly situation changes a lot. Like, you
Yep.
can't take a team starting quarterback away, and in my opinion, still feel they have the best shot in their division. But it's tough for me to gauge the Tiger Cats. I mean, it's another team. Look, new coach. They're going to be bringing in new personnel and stuff. That's a team I think is going to get off to a slow start. But that's a team that if they hit their stride at the right time, they could do some damage in the East. Just because if they stay healthy and we Frank and I have covered Scott Milanovic before. We know that he's kind of a no nonsense coach, and he brings out the best in a veteran roster. That's what he's there for. So I think, yeah, but I can see that from the Hamilton side. Montreal I think that's still a team you gotta look at here. They got over the hump. Jason Moss finally gets that Grey Cup, but he now knows once you get there, you want to keep that standard. Yes, preseason can sometimes be a little. You can take too much for a preseason game, but I also think I saw that Montreal team, and that's a team that's still very confident, very they're they're fun. They're getting a little bit fun to watch. They're trying to, go with a more high flying, up tempo offense, and that's gonna pose a bit of a problem in the East there. So I think because Montreal is on that high from last year, if they can maintain that momentum, it should work out. For Toronto, I just think, they're going to have to weather the storm a little bit. I think there's going to be a lot of close games. and they gotta make sure that they're not leaving points on the board. We saw a little bit of that in preseason. That cannot happen in the regular season.
I want to drill down a little bit on what you said there, David, as far as starting slow. That's typical of the Canadian Football League and the teams that ended up winning the Grey Cup more often than not. And that is that it's how you finish in the Canadian Football League. It's after Labor Day and what you do going on after that. My point is that it doesn't matter what situation a team finds itself in. For example, you've got Montreal they're off to a really good start because they have the least of the changes that need to be made, especially as a defending Grey Cup champ. They've had very few changes. They've had some, but not as many as does happen from time to time. With Hamilton and Toronto, both those teams are rebuilding I think for the same reason, and that is they're trying to reacquire the greatness that they previously had. The Argos as recently as last year, and Hamilton past years. So there's an opportunity for them. It doesn't matter how they start as long as they don't eliminate themselves from the playoffs. And I think the real team that's going to impact on how those three teams finish, in my opinion, is Ottawa. If Ottawa cleans up its act, it could really get muddy as far as even a playoff position in the East.
I feel like Ottawa is going to be a team, like, I don't have them making the playoffs in 2024, but I definitely don't think they're going to be the same pushover, you're just going to run them off the field kind of team. I feel like they're going to be more harder to play against, and you have like so many teams that are competitive. I feel like the East more so than the West. I feel like the West, you basically have two teams that are the clear-cut front runners, and then three teams, two that are trying to find their identities, and one that I think's in a transition. That's Calgary. But no, with the East, like, it's anyone's game. I'm really intrigued by Hamilton just because you got to look from what that fan base is feeling and what the organization feels, and know this year's 25 years since you last won the championship, the Grey Cup. I don't think they want to make that go any further, because when you look at it too, every team's won since, I believe, 2010 now. Since 2010, every team has won a Grey Cup at least once. Hamilton hasn't won one in 25 years. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of pressure externally from that, but I don't know if it'll be felt internally. Meanwhile, with Toronto, look, I really like the fact that they get BC on Sunday. I think it's a great litmus test. I feel like, too, it's a great chance to find out who they are, and that's the one thing I got to say, just to add on to all that. It's going to be exciting. And also, too, with Ottawa, some nice new jerseys came out today for their 10th anniversary. And also, too, I really like the logo with the two axes and the 10 in the middle. So kudos to the Red Blacks.
Well, yeah, I think for Toronto, getting BC right off the hop that's a good way to test where you kind of feel you are as a team. Ottawa, yeah, I try. That's, I think, a team that's going to be better, but not necessarily good enough when you look at the competition in the East. I do think it's going to be very close in the East.
Yeah.
But in the West, I think you're right about the two teams at the top. Like, those are the teams that you are looking at and saying, maybe, I wouldn't say it's a pick 'em yet. I still think Winnipeg has the full complete roster. I don't think BC is that far behind, but BC changed a lot of minds last year. We kind of all thought that they were in a bit of trouble when Nathan Rourke left, and that proved to not be an issue for them. So this year might be one of those years where everything is so close, all across the league. I don't think you're going to see. I mean, I'm going to say this now, and we're going to get a team that's going to finish 4-14 just to screw with me. But, like, I don't know how many teams we're going to expect to be in that 4-14 mark that we usually have been accustomed to seeing.
If we agree that Edmonton and Ottawa are going to be the two bottom feeders in each of the division, I agree with you. I don't think either of them is going to have a 4-14 record.
The one team I can see having not a 4-14 record, but like a 6-12 record or a 7-11 record is Calgary. I just think that, look, quarterback's still a big question mark. I think that's why they brought in Matthew Schultz from Hamilton, and then you have that weird transition period where they didn't prepare for life after Bo, so we'll have to see what they do. But yeah, there's no real team in the league this year you look at as like a pushover, like how last year Edmonton was an easy win for a lot of teams, and they didn't get their first win until August against Hamilton. And then with Hamilton too, it's sort of the same thing as well. I want to go back to them. They had a lot of tough losses early in the year that I don't think they can afford to have again, especially to considering they actually open Calgary, Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan. It's a very interesting schedule. And then obviously we go down there July 20th, so we'll have to wait and see what they do there. But all in all, it's the CFL is great because it's different from the NFL, where the NFL usually have like your clear cuts, like who you think the best are. The CFL, it's literally all of, like, I know in the NFL they say if you're playing well after American Thanksgiving, you have a chance to get to the Super Bowl. The CFL, look, you could be bad to Labor Day. You turn it around, you win a few games, you find the gas pedal at the right time, you can win the championship. We've seen it the last 2 years with Toronto and Montreal.
Yeah, the Grey Cup champion usually has a good run at the end of the year. It basically comes down to that. How are you playing your last 4 or 5 games?
Exactly. And I was looking at Toronto's already. They finished with Ottawa and Edmonton on the season, and I believe they also have Winnipeg and Montreal sprinkled in there. So they're going to have some challenges, and they're going to have some, some games where they, if they are in the position to get into the playoffs, where they truly stand. The other thing I like about Toronto's schedule is I know last year bye weeks was a problem. They obviously had their last bye week at the middle of August, but even if Sunday doesn't go to plan, I like that they have the bye between the games with Edmonton coming into town in a couple weeks, just so they can kind of see, like, if it doesn't work, hey, this is what didn't work and this is how we can improve, or hey, even how can we improve upon getting better if they do beat BC on Sunday night.
I mean, yeah, I think they like the fact that they're not starting the season on a bye. They're actually getting a chance to play to start the year. So I think that's an improvement right there for Toronto. Like some teams just like to get going and like to get a little bit of momentum and get a good gauge. Like one game, sure, like they can really take the one game and see how things are going and if they need to work on anything. But at the same time, they want to be able to get back into it sometimes if it's a win or a loss. They won't want to stew on a loss too long, and they also don't want to lose what they did in a win, especially on a bye week, right? Like it'll help some of the players who maybe are looking for, some players who are looking for living situations or, try to get some stuff done during the bye week that they couldn't do from, end of training camp to the season starts. So it does help in that regard. But I do think that players would prefer if they were to get a good rep of games just to start off.
I think last year was a perfect example of what's wrong with having all your bye weeks early. You can play well during the season the whole time, even if the bye weeks are all early and before August, as Griff's mentioned. But the thing is, as the season wears on, I believe the Argos really did. They had the handicap of trying to create bye weeks at the end of the season. So instead of the whole team getting a rest, they piece by piece by piece. And anybody who look, I'm not here making excuses for the Argos, but just establish a real principle here. And if you're forced to give guys time off in pieces in the team, you can't tell me that's better and it's not worse than being able to have the whole team take a week off.
Yeah, I completely agree because I even remember last year the Hamilton game, and the first question after Ryan was, "Hey, how do you view next week?" Obviously, they're going into Winnipeg, and for him, it was just about resting guys and getting guys healthy. I feel like that's the kind of game then where if they had a bye week in September, you can play a full squad and see, hey, what do we have against what could have been a potential Grey Cup matchup?
Keep
Obviously,
that
that's not
momentum
how
that
it
we were
went.
talking about. Keep that momentum that we're talking about. You're trying to establish.
Exactly, 100%. And even the other thing with Toronto too that they were so good at last year is they were able to win on all three sides of the ball throughout the season. And the biggest game I look at that was Calgary. Look, Calgary was scoring on them. They were scoring on Calgary. But then it took a Javon Leake return to really push them over the hump and get the win in front of the exhibition crowd. So there's a lot with just going back to Toronto. There's a lot to be excited for, but at the same time too, I feel like this is a team that I don't want to say will establish an identity early because I have faith in Dinwiddie to rewrite the ship. And considering every year since he's gotten here, they've gone to the East Final. Will they again? Who knows? And then I know as well, like I said, I really think it's a three-horse race in the East. I really, really do. It's just with Montreal, my only concern is, will you sit on, hey, we won, and then now instead of being like, oh, here comes Montreal, it's, hey, here comes Montreal, because we still remember last year, they did not beat a single good team that was over 500 until they got to the East Final.
Dinwiddie and the Argos, in my opinion, have a reputation that they've developed for the games that we've gone to, guys. If there's something that I consider uh, their strength, and that is their ability to adjust not only within the game but also within the season. And that isn't just for Dinwiddie; it's for the scouts and it's for the whole team as an organization. They've been able to do that. In fact, so much so, guys, when we're sitting at halftime going, "Let's see if the Argos will be able to adjust." Most times they did. It was so important to them and their ability that when they didn't adjust, it was like, wow, they didn't adjust. You know what I mean? Like they had that reputation where you expected them to come out better in the second half.
Well, yeah, I think when you look at the Argos themselves, the big one for me here is the culture, as you're kind of alluding to, Griff, with Ryan Dinwiddie. The reason why you don't think they're going to fall off is that there's a standard that's been set, and you talk to a lot of players that have come into this team, especially this year. I talked to the best one here. I talked to Nick Arbuckle. He was here in 2021 in the first year under Ryan Dinwiddie. He said things were kind of just getting established. Things weren't done in his first year. He says he came back, 2 years later. He says that you could tell the difference. The culture has been set. You come in and you know what the expectation is, and there's higher expectations now, right? This is a team that won a Grey Cup, team that had one of the greatest regular seasons in recent memory. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because there's a standard set, not just by the coach staff, but by the players in the room. Did they lose some of those players? Yes, but they also kept quite a few of those voices, right? Win McManus on defense, Tavares Daniels on offense. It kind of flows from top to the bottom, right? And how everything is kind of put together for that team. Now Montreal has sort of established that now for themselves. It took a little bit of time, but they added, two key players near the end of the year that kind of did help really put that all together. Hamilton, that's the tricky one because they lost. It's Frank. No, we talked about it. They lost some guys who were kind of the culture setters, right? Simone Lawrence, Jameer Thurman. Those were guys that set the culture there. How much of it is going to change now that you've got new players, new voices? How long is it going to take for that standard to be set now?
That you nailed it on the head because the biggest resign, I know they lost AJ, I know they lost Corey Mace, they lost a bunch of other players on defense to free agency and other teams. But when I saw they re-sign Wynton McManus, that was huge for the team because he's a leader. I also noticed that I want to point out Friday's touchdown, Brian Scott to Kevin Mittal. And the one thing I noticed on the sidelines was Wynton McManus running down, and then out of nowhere, Tavares Daniels just sprints down the field because of how happy they were for their guy to get in the end zone, preseason or not. I even remember, David, we were in the room Friday with Tyshawn Blackman or Blackburn? I'm trying to remember his last name. Blackburn. And I asked him about the culture right away, and he just said right away, you know what it's like here. And even last year over Cameron Duke saying that this is the most cohesive locker room that he's been a part of. So I feel like with Toronto, they're going to keep that standard. Meanwhile, Hamilton, you don't know what to expect. I keep harping on the whole 25-year thing because it looms so large for a 9-team league, especially considering the team that's celebrating their 10th anniversary has also won a Grey Cup. So that's where I feel like I said, who's going to be in Vancouver? Who knows? But all I know is that we're due for an exciting season, and I want to talk about Saskatchewan for a second because I feel like they're a team we haven't touched on. But when I look at them in a sense of they're going to. I feel like they're going to show some signs of hey, what they can be, but I don't think we'll see it until next year. Especially too because we don't know what is Winnipeg going to be after this year. If they go to the Grey Cup and they lose for the third straight year.
Can I just with Hamilton, the one thing I want to add to what you're saying, Griff, because you're 100% right. The other thing that they have to deal with is the pressure to win, because they have a lot of heavy. That's part of the reason why I think it's great that they got rid of that. They might be able to take advantage of this opportunity with the old school guys gone, because there's a lot of memories in recent memories, Grey Cups in Hamilton that have been major disappointments and have to be heavy on them, on the bear on their shoulders. So I just wanted to add that to what you said. And as far as Saskatchewan's concerned, if Corey Mace deserves any credit for what happened with Toronto, the immediate improvement that defense showed under his leadership, it won't surprise me that Saskatchewan jumps out of the gate really quick. I'm not saying they will, but it won't surprise me that they do. But the question always is going to be their offense and the health of their quarterback, which was the problem, really the root of their problem last year.
Yeah, I mean, look, health always plays a big factor in any team's, success and failure, right? I look at the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They lost Adam Bighill, their best defensive player, arguably their most important defensive player, in the final 2 games of their season. And you notice a difference in that Winnipeg team because they didn't have him there, right? So I think, injuries do play a part of it. When I look at Saskatchewan, that's a lot of turnover. That's a lot of change. I look at Saskatchewan in a similar vein to Toronto, but the main difference is you got a guy like Trevor Harris there. And he's been there. He's been on teams where it's been a work in progress. Think back to his time in Ottawa, the expansion team, right? He took over for, a veteran in Henry Burris, but eventually he established himself with that team. So I think that's a team that can fly a little bit under the radar, but at the same time, there's a lot of nervousness around there, right? Because back-to-back seasons where it's been a disappointment for them after we thought they were a win away from a Grey Cup, not too long ago. So that's a team there that, there's a lot of pressure, but I think they gotta set the culture right. I say culture a lot because, and I sometimes I hate using that word, but in football it means a lot more than I think it does in other sports, because the locker room culture means so much. I've seen Argos teams with not great culture, where players are turning on each other, players are getting mad at each other, players are fighting each other, and it gets ugly, right? But a team that has that accountability, that sets the accountability, that's, I think, was something with Corey Mace. He's going to try to do that in Saskatchewan, but he's also got to realize that's a team that needs to take its next steps, and realize there's opportunity in the West, even just to make the playoffs. Right, we talking about being a 1-2 race for the top of the division. Number 3, that's wide open right now, and that's the team I think that has the best chance, just because I think they understand of that opportunities there, and that's why they made all those changes in the offseason.
The other word that you might add to Saskatchewan and them and Mace having to make sure they create, and that's discipline.
Both are fantastic words. Look, I know, culture is a word with sport. You don't like to say, how there's, people say sport culture, but, how hockey culture, basketball culture, etc. Football culture is the one that truly, truly applies on and off the field. Is your locker room healthy on the field? You're going to be great. If your culture is healthy off the field, it can lead to problems on the field. So I just wanted to say that. And then, Frank, I love the discipline part of it, just because, look, when you have a disciplined locker room that won't put up with anything, because here's the thing. Penalties can just set a great play from, hey, you had a 40-yard beautiful catch and you're about to score, to, oh, hey, you're pushed back 15 yards and you got to make up ground and potentially turn the ball over on downs. But you know what? That's the thing with Saskatchewan. They got to start early. I like that they have Edmonton out of the gates on Saturday afternoon, thanks to the Edmonton Oilers. But a game like that for those teams, we're going to kind of find out, hey, what are the Rough Riders? What are the Elk? And then when I mentioned the Stampeders, I just think they're in that year where, look, they weren't really ready for life after Bo. And I know, I spoke to some Stamps fans at the Grey Cup, and they were, first words out of my mouth, what do you think of Jake Mayer? And the fan base still isn't sold on him. Dave Dickinson still is a great head coach. They still have a lot of talent around him. But if your quarterback's not performing up to level, that's where it can become a problem. Meanwhile, then, like what we said, BC and Winnipeg, it's just a matter of, look, can you stay healthy and how good can you be? Because I still remember this in the Grey Cup last year. 2022, the beat reporters were saying it was surprise. they were surprised that they lost. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe that. This year, it seemed like they had that, we're going to win, nothing's going to stop us. And you lost, and it left them just, they were disappointed, they were angry, they were pissed off. So that's the other pressure with Winnipeg, too, is you have an aging core. And I know they've won 2 in a row, but the fact that you lost 2 in a row, that memory gets wiped completely away. So if you go out there this year, make the Grey Cup again, and you leave the field with not golden blue confetti, where do you go from here if you're the Bombers?
It's a big year for them, and I think it's a big year for a lot of teams. I really, if when you talk about Calgary, I think of Calgary the opposite way I think of Ottawa. With Ottawa, it seems the last few years it's been, well, this could be the year. This could be the year. This could be the year. And the same words are said with Calgary, but with an opposite feeling. This could be the year that Calgary really drops off the table. But they keep surviving just like Ottawa keeps not improving.
I look at I look at Winnipeg here, and I wrote this in my previews for sports, and I did the West this year. And it's like, yeah, you bring up the 2 losses and 2 straight Grey Cups. To me, that's either going to do one or two things. That's going to motivate them and say revenge season again. They had a good like they finished first in the West again despite losing against Toronto.
14-4, I believe.
Right, 14-4. They were dynamite at home once again. But does this maybe expose a bit of a chink in the armor? An older roster, as you said, got some veterans. I look at Adam Bighill, injured to start the year. It's not something you want to see after what he went through to end the year. You look at the fact that Jackson Jeffcoat's gone, right? That's another guy who was a big contributor for them.
1-2 punch, half of it gone.
Right? You look at Zach Collaros. He's not getting any younger, and he didn't exactly have his best in the Grey Cup. And that's a guy. Look, in the first Grey Cup they won, it was on the back of Andrew Harris. In a lot of ways, he dominated line of scrimmage against Hamilton, and that kind of helped things with Zach there. The second one, that was like the Wind Grey Cup, where the Wind took over, and it was kind of hard for both offenses. This year, people were saying that he should have won the MOP. He needs to make it outright clear that he's the MOP if they want to be first in the West, because I think that's crucial for Winnipeg. Get the West, get the bye. That's been the recipe for success for them. If I'm BC, that's where you gotta. That's the goal. They talked a lot in BC about 2 straight years where they've been to the semifinal, they've been to the West Final, and they're gone. Now they got to change that. They don't want to have to play that extra game. They want Winnipeg to have to go through the harder route. They want the home field advantage. BC, like that, I was talking with someone today. The fact that you're going to have more of an atmosphere maybe this year, BC, than ever because of what's on the line for them. And we know teams that host a Grey Cup, there's so much more pressure to get there. But I think that's going to only make BC a much more dangerous team. And I think maybe they're going to realize Winnipeg has got a little bit of vulnerability here, but at the same time, they've been there and they've done it. They're going to go for 5 straight Grey Cup appearances. When was the last time we've seen a team in a position to go 5 straight Grey Cup appearances?
Edmonton in the 80s?
Edmonton, the big Edmonton teams. And they walked away with Grey Cups every time. So, you even think of, Frank, the Calgary teams in the late 2010s, where you had them 16, 17, and 18. They're the same as they lived the life that you're predicting or saying may happen with Winnipeg. They were the best team, and they didn't win that many Grey Cups. They lost to Toronto. They should have won. They lost to Ottawa. They should have won. Those were 2 Grey Cups that they should have won. And then there was the one that they should have won in 2012 that they didn't.
Right.
Your question.
And so to me, that's Winnipeg right there, in my opinion. Good to win 2, but then it's afterwards, 2 were they were the favorites. They had no reason to lose those games, but they let their opponents stay in those games too because their offense wasn't hitting. They were making bad decisions on offense. Their defense was a little banged up and made mistakes at crucial points in the game. 2 straight years where you allow the other team to go on a big drive at the end of the game to take the lead. Now, the Montreal one was with almost no time left. The one against Toronto, you still had some time to make that a game, but it speaks to the MO of where CFL teams feel like they can beat Winnipeg. You keep it close. You just keep it as close as you can, and hope for a little bit of luck along the way. And if you're Winnipeg, that stings, but it could be a good motivation tool for sure.
Well, you talked about culture, and don't forget the other word is momentum, and that's true in the game too. And Winnipeg, if they lose momentum, they're human, just like everybody else.
I pulled up Winnipeg's schedule quickly just to see what they have coming out of the gate. Obviously, they play Montreal Thursday in the Grey Cup. It's weird, Grey Cup rematch, but in Winnipeg, and then they don't play Montreal again until the very last game of the season. So that's gonna be interesting for them. But then week 3, they play home to BC Lions on the Friday night. And if you guys remember last year, BC went in there and took care of them, no problem. They weren't BC's going to be that team that they're not going to be afraid to play anyone, and people. I'm not saying they're going to be afraid to play them, but they're going to walk in every game, I feel like, and say, "Hey, we have a chance to win." We're, like you said, they're hosting the Grey Cup this year. Their season's already been made a big deal because of stuff off the field, and it's nothing bad. It's the fact that, look, your home opener is completely sold out because you're bringing in wonderful concert with 50 Cent, and then now you have a Grey Cup halftime show where we're seeing the CFL start to apply their halftime show to a greater audience and try to bring in new viewers. So there's a lot on the line for BC. And like I said, that's why from both sides of it, I like Sunday's matchup in Toronto. I like to see Toronto for what we're going to see. And then I also look at, I remember last year's game. There was a lot of trash talk coming from BC side. Then you had Vernon Adams throw the 6 picks. It was an outright just 40, I believe it was 45-24 was the final score. And I was with BC before the game, and I saw them, they were ready to go. And then Toronto was just like, all right, we're going to shut them up. And now with Toronto, they can go out there and just, not shut anyone up, but kind of say, hey, I know our quarterback situation is different. Chad Kelly's not here, but we got Dukes, and Dukes can handle his own. So that's what I think they're really trying to prove. My only question with Toronto is how their run game be, just because we know what AJ was. But I feel like people have to go out there and realize AJ's not here, and Adeboyo is his own person. And at the same time, too, what's Toronto's DB room going to look like? It's a very exciting. It's very exciting to think about, just because so many teams have so many. Hey, what are you going to be in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of fans are a little concerned about the backfield DB position, because a lot of known names are gone. Tavares McFadden, Cornell, but they're not the only team that's doing this. No. Jonathan Moxley gone, Marcus Sales gone. Teams are. It's a matter of they found younger. I hate to say it, but more cost-effective players to play those positions.
Athletes. Not by accident, they have to.
Yeah, no, in a lot of ways they do have to, right? I do wonder for Toronto, was a little bit of that salary related. I mean, I don't know how it works with the Chad Kelly suspension, if his salary is still on the books while they have to sign another quarterback onto the roster. I don't think Nick Arbuckle is making bank, but he's not getting paid nothing to be here. So I do think that a lot of teams in the league are maybe sending a message to some of the veteran players too, that there are younger guys that are pushing for your positions, pushing for your playing time. You got to be better, and you got to be ready for it too.
Is there a sport that has as much extra talent than football?
On defense? No.
Anywhere, David. I don't think there's a sport that comes close where the supply of players can really remake other teams faster than any other sport. There's so much talent in football.
There's no sport. I think you're right, Frank, because I don't think there's no sport where a guy even picked in the 5th or 6th round can have an immediate impact on the team.
That's the depth of the talent. That's the whole point, right?
Right. Coaching has gone so much better too, coaching these players up. Defensively, yes. Offensively, I think it's still a bit of work in progress, right? We talked to Ryan Dinwiddie, Kevin Mittal. A lot of people are like, oh, Can't wait to see this guy get a lot of playing time. But you hear Ryan Dinwiddie, he had a really good play in Guelph. A lot of work that has to be done, right? You got to get him playing a bit more like a pro when it comes to running his routes and things like that. That's I think where the sport maybe lacks a little bit. Offensive players take a little bit more time getting themselves set. Defensively, you tell guys this is the scheme, this is what you need to do. Go out and do it, right? In offense, there's more to it. It's a rhythm and a dance, right? Chemistry, a lot of those things. It's a little more different, I think, offense and defense. But again, as you say, the talent turnover on defense is just remarkable. Everyone was so worried when the Argos lost Pickett to the Red Blacks, right? How are they going to replace him? They found like, there are guys out there. They just get highlighted in different ways because, you know, there are good players in this league. There are a lot of good players in this league. You just have to find them and you have to coach them. And I think that's what separates the good teams in the CFL from the, not so great teams or the lower tier teams.
The Argos do something well, and especially under Coach Dinwiddie, is they are merit driven. So you'll have a guy who's not necessarily, and it starts right at the top with quarterbacks. If nothing else, Dinwiddie proved that it doesn't matter who comes in to have the job. The guy who plays the best is going to end up with the job. And the defense was worked that way for the Argos as well. We saw players at the beginning of the season that were on the practice roster who ended up being key players. So, that's the important thing. Like I said, there's a lot of talent in football. You can afford to do that. You can afford to have an assembly line. That's why Calgary had the reputation of plug and play. That it works not because teams are geniuses, but they understand the system and they play it the way they need to play it so that they develop an opportunity and a flow that keeps them winning.
Yeah. That's because that's what football is all about. Like, you gotta just find those tapped resources and use them to the best of your ability. Because there's one other thing I wanted to bring up. When I look at Toronto, like, I feel like they're going to be anchored a lot by how their defensive line plays and how the linebacking core plays. Because, like, look, last year was all great, but that basically every time there was an interception, everyone credited, hey, the defensive line got to the quarterback in enough time to where he's going to make a mistake and get the ball to where, hey, the DB can get in place to make an interception. So I have the faith and confidence in Toronto to, like, get it done. But when it comes to them offensively, I still think it is going to be a receiver-heavy offense. I feel like we're truly going to see, those breakout guys like Amital come out. But guys like Coxie, Daniels, and Brissett are going to be relied upon heavily, I think, to really be that driving force and help out Cameron Dukes or Arbuckle or whoever ends up starting.
Or the running game.
And over the running game. And the running game, too. I just think, like, look, we know what the receivers are capable of throughout the course of a season. Meanwhile, I think the running game, it's kind of like it's like the empty chapter in a book. That's the chapter that's going to be written. And we're going to find that written, I believe, through a game-by-game basis.
I look at, especially when you look at the CFL, you look at a lot of teams and they talk about turnovers. It's not necessarily getting teams off the field 2-0. It's getting the turnovers because you want to flip the field. Special teams, like, we're seeing punters so much better in the CFL at, pinning teams deep, making them drive the long field in a lot of ways. You don't see as many, 80, 90-yard drives, right, in the CFL. And I think that's because defense has become so good, but also turnovers, right? Getting pressure and forcing a pick, forcing a fumble. I like to actually, that's something I like to figure out is how much of interceptions gone up from, over a period of time. That's something I'll have to make a pet project for myself. But to me, that's where I'd like to see, teams get more protecting the football a little bit more. It's nice to go out and try to make the big play, try to get a lot of yards, but you also don't want to give your you don't want to put your defense in a bad spot either. I think that's what the Toronto Argonauts did so well last year. They protected the quarterback, so they weren't necessarily making those dumb mistakes because they're protecting their quarterback, but they were a turnover machine. as you said, like the DBs are getting a lot of easy. I wouldn't say easy interceptions. You got to make the play, but they there was clearly a lot of balls being thrown where you're just like, well, what the heck was that? But that's because the pressure that was coming to them. And the Argos, when they went through their offseason, their biggest move, and again, another underrated move, was that trade with that Edmonton against Zerna, right? Big body, not necessarily a guy that you're going to see go out and get a lot of sacks, but he's going to be such a disruptor, and he's going to set up other guys to go out and get the sacks or go out and set the edge and get the pressure. So that's where a lot of CFL teams now are, especially on defense, are trying to really put an emphasis on turnovers, because it puts their offenses in such better positions to go out there and score and go out and put points on the field.
You know what? Yeah, I like the Cesarna move too, because it's going to open up for, the Sean Oakmans, the Winton McManuses. It's going to open up for other guys on the defensive line, or even too, if you want to run blitz packages, it's going to help out a lot. One other thing I wanted to bring up was I wanted to go back to Montreal. Do we feel like life's going to get easier for Cody Fajardo now that he kind of got the monkey off his back, or do you think that could just cause him to maybe, like where do you stand on like what kind of season he could have with the Alouettes this year?
Well, his bar wasn't really that high.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, he didn't put this team on his back. I don't think that would be harsh on my part to suggest that, he didn't have an incredible season. He played, he did what, a lot of quarterbacks over time have done, and that is play mistake-free football, which is more important even than how many yards you can get passing. So the bar's not that high for him. If he has the same kind of season this year, that'll be great. If he has a good season and statistically he starts looking like a decent quarterback, really good quarterback, the bar's not that high that he could have an improvement. It doesn't have to be that much for him to look that much better. I'm not trying to throw any shade on him. I'm just saying that he did a workmanlike job at quarterback. He wasn't a guy that made a lot of outstanding plays that were memorable.
He relied on his teammates a lot to help him, make the plays too. You saw Cody Fajardo used to be the guy that did it all with his legs, especially in Saskatchewan, putting himself in a position where he was going to get the first downs on his own. That sort of changed in Montreal. Jason Moss pretty much told him, you gotta in a way kind of trust your teammates a little bit more. I'm curious to see how the Austin Mack departure maybe potentially changes that, because he was such a good player last year. They're going to have to find a guy to replace that production. Probably Julian Grant will be that guy for them. He had a pretty good preseason. I just think with Fajardo, like, he's got the ability where he could lead the league in throwing and passing yards, but I don't think that's where he wants to be. I think he wants to be the quarterback that gets his team the wins rather than go out and get the stats. And I think that's been the biggest change for him as a player, is to do more of what the team needs rather than what he thinks he needs to do.
The other point too, I just want to bring up Toronto again, was Florian was another player I wanted to mention with the Cesarna signing. But yeah, like when I say with Cody, I just mean like when I say the monkey off the back, I mean obviously just because it's look like he hasn't been the guy where there's always been that like pressure to win on him, kind of like what we're putting on Caleros right now. So that's where I get that from. That's all I just wanted to mention with that. But all in all, it's gonna be quite the season. But one other thing I wanted to do today was, we got some games to talk about. So do we feel like going through the games, seeing who's going to win, who's going to lose them?
If you want.
All right, cool. Because I did this year, so the folks who are watching on YouTube can see, look, all the games are listed, all the odds are there. And the first one we have up is Winnipeg versus Montreal in the Grey Cup rematch. Do we see the champs starting 1-0, or do we see Winnipeg getting back to what they were last year?
Well, this game is in Winnipeg. I think that's the big caveat there, which I know Montreal is probably not happy about. They go out, they win a Grey Cup, and they can't even host the first game of the year. So I think that helps Winnipeg out. And I think 6.5 is the spread.
Yes, sir.
It's a little heavy for me. I'm more comfortable with like the 4.5 1.5. I don't think that's a lot to put on Winnipeg right off the hop. I think they're going to be a little slow out of the gate. So I would pick Montreal to cover, but I would still pick Winnipeg to win. And then what's the over under 46.5?
Yes. Most
I'm
of them
gonna
are
go.
around 45, 46 this weekend, by the way.
I'm gonna go under because I do think Winnipeg's defense is going to be a handful for that Montreal offense.
I'm going to go under, and I'm going to go Montreal's going to win. They're going to cover the spread and win.
That's what I said for the Grey Cup. Those are my exact words. I had Montreal to win, cover, but I did the under, and the over ended up hitting to win them the game. I'm with David on this one. I think I'm under. I think under. I think this could be like a 24 to 20 football game. Winnipeg just does enough to scrape by, kind of like they did last year, week 1 against Hamilton, I believe. And then what was the other thing I was going to say too at this game? But Montreal still hangs in tough, and we see, hey, this is the Montreal that was left off their season from last year. They're starting right back where they left off. God, I don't know why that was a tongue twister. Next game, I'm going to keep this one short and sweet for me. I think Hamilton goes into Calgary and takes care of business. I know it's not a fun place to play. I know a lot of teams struggle there. Toronto mainly, which we'll see how they do when they go there August 4th. But I like Hamilton. I like Hamilton on the points. And this is the game where I like the over to hit, just because we don't know what either defense is going to be yet. And look, Calgary's defense had a lot of high scoring games last year. Like I look back to the game against Toronto, I think the over hit at the beginning of the third quarter.
So I do like Hamilton in this game, especially you got the Bo Levi Mitchell returning first game.
That too.
In Calgary. He didn't get that opportunity in 2023, not only because the CFL just didn't even flat out schedule it, but because he also was hurt so much last year. I think Hamilton, yeah, I mean, I would pick them, and I don't know about the over under on this one because I still think Calgary's defense maybe doesn't get enough credit. They got a good stable of veterans there. But I think it's going to go under because I think Calgary's going to rely a lot on the run, and that's going to affect their points total. I think their ability to really put up offense, unless Jake Maier has a game to remember. I think Hamilton should win this one pretty steadily.
I'm going to say Hamilton wins in Calgary. It's under, and I really think that it's going to have more to do with two teams' offenses that take a little longer to go. Offenses start late in the year, and that's not so much the teams, but generally speaking, offenses don't run as hard as defenses early.
Fair point. I'm still sticking the opposite of you guys. I'm going over because I like the points. I'm gonna go Saskatchewan over Edmonton just because I feel like, look, this is that game where it's like, hey, Corey Mace gets his first win. It's like this whole thing, because also with Edmonton, we don't really know yet what is their true identity for 2024. We don't know, hey, are they going to be that surprise team that might sneak into the third spot? But then, like you said, for David, the door's wide open for the Rough Riders. The Rough Riders have that. It's going to be a why not us mentality. It's going to be they have nothing to lose. It's not like they're having anything high stakes. It's not like you're hitting on a 17 in blackjack. No, they got a 9 dealt by the dealer, and they're hoping that a king is underneath that card. They got a 7 and a 3, and they're hoping an ace is the next card they hit on. So with that, give me Saskatchewan. It's a pick'em game too, and this is a game where I could see it being like a push for the over under. It's at 46.5 right now, but I can see that if I had to pick, I think I'm going under. I'm going to go under. I'm going to go Saskatchewan and under here.
Is this in Saskatchewan or in Edmonton?
It's in Edmonton. This is the game, remember, that was moved because of
right,
of the Cup final.
Because so it's gonna be an earlier game. I still think Saskatchewan. I like them in this one. I like the over in this because Saskatchewan can go out to a lead, but I think McLeod Bethel Thompson finds ways to get some scores here for Edmonton. I think we've seen a lot of him, and we've seen a lot of him when when the teams aren't at their even when his team's trailing, he finds a way to put up points. So I think I like to hit their ability to go over here.
I have to I have to agree with you on this one, David. I think Saskatchewan will be more ready for the game than Edmonton will. Um, Edmonton just their early season is going to be got to prove something. And I'd like to add something about Edmonton. If they don't have a quick start, guys, I'm not sure Chris Jones is there. They're at that point.
Yeah, I don't. Edmonton. Reason why I'm bullish on them, their defense got gutted, especially on that defensive line. Jason Shivers taking over as defensive coordinator, I think will hopefully help a little bit there, so that Chris Jones can focus on being a head coach, because he's got so many hats in Edmonton. It's ridiculous. He wants to just take all the paychecks. But I just don't know if I can trust that offensive line in Edmonton. I don't know if I can just trust Edmonton's offense to really go toe to toe against really good. Defensively, I think Saskatchewan's going to be tough. That's going to be a tough defense to go up against. And I think that's going to be where Edmonton's going to struggle, especially early in the game.
I'm looking at their schedule. They play obviously Saskatchewan, but then they play Montreal, Toronto, and then BC. That's not an easy stretch.
No.
If they can go 2-2 in their first four, it'll be good for them. But if they go, I agree with Frank. If they're like 1-3, or even after they play the Red Blacks in their July is where they play Red Blacks twice, and then Edmonton, or not Edmonton, they play Hamilton. Getting my tons mixed up. And they're only at two or three wins going into August. Yeah, that's where I think you make change, because like, especially too, if you can find a coach get in there at the right time, get them over the hump, it can change their season. But there's so many questions with the Elks. They're interesting. But like I said, for this, I gotta go to Saskatchewan.
And how much pressure do you think the Oilers' success is going to have on that team?
Oh, it's gonna kind of just like, I think it's gonna like take away where like they can kind of get away with stuff for like the first little bit, but once the Cup final's over, it's gonna be, hey Elks, what's going on over there? Oh, you're 2-5. Oh, we don't care.
Well, you know what the news that we got is nobody's reporting on the Elks. The media there has really gone into hiding. And you know, this is an organization that's had a lot of success over the years, so they're kind of spoiled, and I'm not sure they can go much longer with this kind of team being last.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think right now everyone's so Oilers crazed that I don't blame the fact that there's not that much coverage going on with Edmonton, the Elks, because everyone's so focused on the Oilers. So yeah, they can fly out on the radar a little bit here, but that's a team that has, they're bringing in a new. They're going to look for a new owner, right? That's a team that has such a decorated past, right, in terms of their success at winning, that they're going to have to pick it up at some point, right? Now, the problem is the West has become so tough, right? Winnipeg's turnaround and their reign of dominance here has really put Edmonton behind the eight ball, especially in BC too. Like, those are two teams that really supplanted Edmonton, and that's why things have gone so tough. There's also a reason why I think that CFL really needs to start expanding, so that we can have separate divisions here, so that we can really see these teams really push each other a little bit more, and we see, the divisions a little more spread out a little bit here and a little more balanced. Because I think you think about how, like, when people say, "Oh, Edmonton should be better this year," I'm like, who's going to be worse in the West to allow Edmonton to be that much better? I don't see it right now. And that's the same issue I have with Ottawa. I don't see how those teams can get better with the competition around them that much tougher.
Yeah, and yeah, you're 100% right, because what's Edmonton counting on? Calgary alone? Like, Calgary alone isn't enough for them to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and like when I say Calgary's going to be bad, like I don't mean Calgary's going to be like terrible, but I just think they're going to be a step back from what they were. Just because,
8-10.
Exactly. And like, can you see Edmonton winning 8 games? I can't. I can see Edmonton winning maybe 6 or 7 at most. But we'll see. And then Sunday night we wrap up with a game that 3 of us will be at, BC versus Toronto. I'm going to let you guys take this one first. What do we think is going to happen Sunday? Will the Boatmen roll on, or will the Lions roar be a little bit too much for them?
Well, it's going to be two teams that are going to be very motivated. The Argos losing the Grey Cup, at home, new quarterback, a lot of off-field issues that they're going to want to overcome, emotionally. And then you've got what David said keeps ringing in my head. You got a Grey Cup year, and that team is going to want to establish right off the hop that they're a contender. This is going to probably be a really good. I don't think it's hard to say that this will be a mid-season form first game of the season for these two teams. So I'm going to say it's going to be really close. It's probably going to get decided on the last play, maybe even a field goal. And I like Liam Hiralahu if he's put in that position where he can win the game for the Argos. I think that's one place where they're sitting pretty with their kicking game. I mean, if someone would have said Boris Beatty's gone, now what are the Argos going to do? I think they replaced him with the best possibility, and this is the kind of game they're going to need a really good kicker.
And just looking back, there have been some lopsided losses between these two teams. I think back to last year in Toronto. Toronto gets up to that big lead because of the turnovers. I look back to when Toronto played in BC when Nathan Rourke was there and they got pummeled. But then I see some close games in between there, right? So I think this is gonna be a close one. I think I think the Argos will cover, but I think it's going to be a close one. But I still think BC has the edge just because they got a full. You're talking about a full throttle offense there. Toronto, I think, is going to have to keep this close with their defense because I don't know if they're going to be able to throw up enough points to what BC can do offensively and might be capable of doing. If Toronto, let's say if Toronto gets field goals on their first few drives, we know that's not gonna be enough to beat BC. They're gonna be throwing touchdowns, and so I think the over is still possible, but I do think the Argos will cover. But I don't know. It's gonna be close, but I don't know. I think BC still has the edge there.
So, the fun fact about this game, the last time that the Toronto Argonauts were a betting underdog was against BC at home last year. Very fun fact. I remember going into that game being like, I didn't like it. BC, remember, they were coming off that big win against Winnipeg as well, and then Toronto just gave it to them. When I look at a game like this, I look at the same thing too, where you have two teams that lost their opportunities to go to the Grey Cup last year. Toronto got embarrassed at home, call a spade, and then Winnipeg was just too much for the Lions to handle. Now you have a Toronto team who's really trying to carve out an identity without their franchise quarterback, and you have a BC team, like David said, look, and Frank said, they want to be in Vancouver come November. They want to be at home. They want to prove to the world, hey, hosting a Grey Cup is not too small for us, or not too big. The moment's not too big for us. But with a game like this, I can see Toronto carving out a path and squeaking out a win. I can see like a 35 or 36 to like 33 win. I can see it being just a back and forth dogfight, kind of like what we saw last year against Calgary in the exhibition game. So when I look at these two teams, look, I think it comes down to which defense can make a big play at the biggest moment. And for right now, I'm going to put my cards in Toronto because, look, no one's going to expect Toronto to go out there and win. That's why they're plus 6.5. That's the biggest spread they've been in a very, very long time. So I think the Boatmen win, but I think this is one of those wins that Ryan will look at as we won, but we got a lot of work to do still.
Yeah, this is going to be, again, this is going to be Ryan Dinwiddie's toughest stretch as a coach, right? He doesn't have his starting quarterback. He doesn't have. Yes, he's gonna have to put Cameron Dukes in the best position to succeed. We've heard Ryan Dinwiddie in the past when things don't go well, he puts the blame on himself. So I think he's going to try the best to put as much pressure on himself rather than on his quarterback to go out there and win that game. I think he's going to try his best to make sure it's not all on Cameron Dukes to have to go and win that game. So I think that's where the Argos are going to have to. There's going to be so much pressure on Cameron Dukes, but he doesn't look as a player that can't handle that pressure. I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough.
They're going to surround him with the best support system.
I agree that Cameron Dukes has an opportunity here to prove what he can do. And, I go back to that comment I made earlier in the show, and that is the depth of talent that exists in football. It's really less about, there's not much need for talent in the Canadian Football League at the quarterback position. What there is there has to be, how can I put this? There has to be a fitness, not a fitness as in health, but a quarterback in the Canadian Football League has to have special characteristics, and it's a cumulative thing. It's a chemistry experiment, right? So can Dukes be the kind of quarterback that becomes successful in the Canadian Football League? We've seen it happen very slowly for a lot of players, a lot of teams, but this could be a first step for him. Remember, 9 games. There's 9 games that whoever's playing quarterback in those 9 games, there's 9 opportunities for somebody to show what they can do. And I agree with you, David. Cameron Dukes is one of those guys that looks like he might be able to take advantage. And then we saw Scott at the last minute that, he made a big play when he needed to as well. And I just think that Ryan Dinwiddie has done nothing but be successful with his quarterbacks. We've seen McLeod Bethel Thompson statistically destroy the opposition, right? And I think that a lot of that goes to Dinwiddie, his ability to make, things work for quarterbacks that he has statistically. Remember, it's that end zone stuff, that red zone stuff that we got to find out. That we got to find out with Toronto. McLeod, the curse that McLeod had was he couldn't get past the red zone enough. Right. And that's where their quarterback of last year, who's suspended, that's what he succeeded in doing. We're going to find out if Cameron Dukes, hopefully for the Argos, I know they're hoping that what happened in that exhibition game against Hamilton doesn't continue throughout the season. That's what they need to do, is to overcome that red zone failure. And that's what's going to be the success or failure of the quarterback.
Do you guys think we see Kelly play at all this year for Toronto, even if it's like, say if Toronto's getting after 9 games, they're 7-2, 6-3. Do we think we see him at all?
I think so.
I think so too, because of what happened. There's been, David, if you want to report on the issue that he's dealing with, give us an update on where
So he settled his lawsuit, his part of the lawsuit with the coach, the former coach, with the strength and conditioning coach. But I think, look, the Argos have invested a lot in Chad Kelly. Like, they're not just going to let him sit around for the whole year. Whether people in the fans and people in the CFL like it or not, there's money invested there. The reason why people would say, well, why didn't they cut him? He was given a lot of money when we reworked his contract that seemingly put the Toronto in a position where if they cut him, they weren't going to they're not saving money. It's going to cost them. It's the way the whole CFL cap works. So, no, he's got a lot of work to do to get himself back even in a position to be back on the field. Right? There's no guarantees he's back after 9 games because the CFL still has to kind of determine that. But if he is eligible to play, the Argos will play him, unless he is in a position where he's going to hurt the team because he's not able to play at the level that they want him to. That's the only way I can see him. As a quarterback, you're missing the first 9 games. He hasn't even been at practice really, so I don't know how much that will have an impact on him for sure. But I do think he will play once the 9 games are up, or whenever they deem a suspension is done.
I believe it's Calgary, August 9th. That's either the 9th game or that's the game that he's eligible to come back.
And that's a home game for the Argos, right?
Yeah, which I think for their sake as well, and for overall, look, the Argos have a fantastic PR department. We all know that. Their communications guys are the best. I feel like if he is to come back, they're going to do it at home. They're not going to do it on the road. Because, sometimes they say, oh, it's better if he starts away from home. Like, it starts on the road, it's not as bad. You get the home crowd. like say like just hypothetical, his first game back is Labor Day. No, that's gasoline on a fire situation. That's not something you want to do. I can see his first game being either that Calgary game or they have the game which is the CNE time against Saskatchewan. So I could see it being either one of those two. But ultimately, we'll wait and see what the league says because at this point, it's totally up to the league when he's allowed to play. And
That's and don't forget practice.
yeah,
You know,
that's the other thing too.
he's not going to start the first week he's practicing. If he can't practice
Oh
till
no,
after the ninth game, you know he's not gonna be in the ninth game. He probably won't make it into the 10th game.
exactly. Because like I just want to pull up their schedule right now. So yeah, so they have so the game again. So here's the thing: the Stampeder game is the ninth game, but then there's a bye week after that.
So that emphasizes they could afford to wait, and they'll have to wait because to get him, under center at practice.
Exactly, and then they have the Stampeder, the Rough Rider game, and then they have 3 straight road games at Hamilton, at Ottawa, and at Vancouver, at BC, excuse me, before returning home on September 20th against Hamilton. So it may not be until September that we see Kelly in an Argonauts uniform again, and it's so weird for this whole situation how it's played out. Just because I always look back to last August when it was this like huge celebratory moment at practice when David and I were there and they had the kids, they had the MLSC Launchpad kids there to have them kind of throw the ball around and play with, and then now you have this. It's taken a very dark turn, but I'm just glad like look the league's got they got their paws on it, they got a pulse on it, and that they'll do what's best for not only him, but they'll do what's best for just the league overall, just because they don't want to hurt their image anymore.
Like I said, the league's going to tell them when he can start practicing, and that'll dictate when he'll actually start.
100%.
Yeah,
But
it's.
go ahead.
I just think with this Kelly situation, it's all about how do they do it. They gotta there's multiple layers to this thing and how they do it right. But I think with enough time, hopefully it gets them back to the place where he can show that he learned from his mistakes and is worthy of being back on the field. So we'll kind of see how that goes.
That's it. It's just now. Hey, not are you a good football player? Are you a good person? That's what this is all going to come down to. Because I wanted to say time heals all wounds, but with a situation like this, it doesn't. Because look, there's a lot of damage that's been done. There's a lot of fan bases on, especially online, that have been very vocal against what Toronto's done and just everything that's happened. But I think from what Toronto's handled it, they've handled it well. Just considering, look, this is a matter that goes off the field. This is a legal matter. This isn't just a matter of a football player.
And you know how tough this must be on Pinball. Pinball, a guy who gives opportunity to players and people who maybe some would suggest don't deserve an opportunity. And I think Kelly fits into that category. And to give him the kind of chance he did, and for it to go like this, we watched some of the interviews that Pinball was in. He looked like he was sitting on the hot seat. And I think it's really unfair to Pinball that he showed faith in somebody. And I think other than the victim, I think the next person that Kelly needs to apologize to is Pinball, who gave him the opportunity to prove what you said. He's a good person.
Exactly. And I felt so bad for Pinball when he had that press when he met with the media at training camp at Guelph, and it was just like everyone's like saying, "Oh, why is he giving these answers? Why is he giving these answers?" But it's just like he probably is not able to speak on anything else. It's like one of those things where he literally says, "We're letting the legal team handle it," because he says a wrong word, and then it's on him. So the way he's handled this, like, look, and also the fact that he's the most vibrant, beaming person in a single room at a given time. That's just the other thing too. Like he's just a ray of sunshine. You could be whoever, and he'll know you. It's just you got to feel bad. You feel bad for the person. You feel like just you got to remember too, building because that's the other thing too. He's got to build up trust again within the organization as well. Because a lot of these guys probably like him, but at the same time too, they know he did something wrong, and he's got to correct his wrong.
Yep, they're married. They have children. Female perspective does enter their lives, right? So there's a price to pay for what happened.
And there's a lot of other females that are on the staff, especially within the
Absolutely.
training department and stuff like that. And even too after games, we always see wives. We always see like so many people that conjugate whether it's in the club, whether it's outside the locker room. There's just so many people that are involved that are women within this organization that, look, at the end of the day, the franchise quarterback did something terrible against to a woman that he's now got to go in there and basically earn their trust back.
Isn't it crazy with the kind of season the Argos had? The perfect season that they had. It's crazy that when we start this season, would you have thought before the last game or before the Eastern Final that we would be discussing um, the rebuilding of a quarterback, and even more the next point that I think that's really important. The organization has something to prove to the fans. What happened in that Eastern Final with how many people showed up? Who would have thought they'd have to rebuild the trust of the fans and the situation with Kelly after the kind of season they had? It's mind boggling, to tell you the truth. And they've got to work on that. There's some corrective behavior that they have to display to satisfy the fans and make them keep coming back.
You had what's? Oh, I'll let you go ahead, David.
I mean, look, they got to find a way to sell out this home opener for Toronto, because you see what they're doing out there in BC and Toronto. It's like they really missed an opportunity to get the momentum from that first sellout that they had in the East Final. They got to find a way now to keep the fans that they have, but also find a way to bring in new guys.
Re-inspire that moment. I don't know how easy that is to do without going 16-2, and I don't know how easy that goes. You being a Grey Cup defending champion, because now their immediate history is not the best kind of promo, right? And that's the whole point. But I think Toronto sports fans are pretty forgiving, and guys, I wasn't there, but it seemed like there was a good crowd in Guelph, and it seems like the fans were engaged. They had a great time. Maybe it's possible that the Argo organization will be forgiven for that playoff thing, and maybe even some fans who really care about the team, because when it comes to the Argos and their fans, you either love the Argos or you don't care. That's what it seems to be in Toronto, right? There is no, we kind of like the Argos. It's either you love the Argos or you don't, because of the situation that they have going on. So for them, they I think they got an opportunity to make up for what happened last year.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's the diehard Argo fans, and then there's the people that'll just go to have a night out by the lake, and because that's the thing they always try to get people into. Like, I know they lower the concession prices to what they normally are. You can get a beer for $5, but Friday night's atmosphere caught me so off guard. There was tailgating around the university. It was a packed house. The only complaint really was that the speaker system was just not in favor for Adam that night, which was unfortunate. And David and I were sitting on metal bleachers, but neither here nor there. Um, they have to. I don't think they have to sell out Sunday, but they have to get at least close to 20,000. I don't know what they're going to get. I feel like it's going to end up being between 15 to 20. But if they can get 17, 18, 19 at BMO Field, it'll be a good look. But if they end up getting 14 or 15, what does that tell you about this team?
They got work to do.
And look, the biggest excuse that they have isn't there right now. The Blue Jays are out of town, so there's no excuse of having to go up against the Blue Jays that
And they're not,
weekend.
and the Jays aren't playing well. So that there's that uphill battle they don't have to compete against.
Yeah, they got to find a way to maybe again put some sort of value. There was a story that came out that the Argos have the best value in terms of tickets, or in the comes to Canadian sports, best value. They need to make people understand where that value is, in my
The
opinion.
the other thing I'll say too with that is there's one game this year, and I know I talk about it, but the fact that they put that exhibition game on a Thursday night, just it didn't sit right with me. I feel like the fact that it's against Saskatchewan, you should have done it on the Friday night. You should have done it on Saturday night. You do that, you're getting 20K, no problem. Thursday, I still think they'll do a good number, but imagine if they have the while traveling team against Saskatchewan Roughriders, you have the CNE, and you have a beautiful night at BMO Field. That's a winning recipe to get 20K in the building on a Friday night. Thursday night makes it a little bit tougher because, look, I know people like to go out on Thursday nights, but Friday nights are true. You can go out, you can have fun. And then, like we did after the CNE game last year, you go get a waffle ice cream sandwich after the game's done.
Did you have to go and remind David?
He got one with us.
No, I know, but I'm just saying. He's thinking about it. Now he can't
Oh,
wait for he can't wait for the exhibition.
oh,
I don't
I
have
know I
any.
can't wait.
I'm just
I
kind
have
of hoping someone will be coming through that door with me.
I have vanilla ice cream and waffles in the freezer. I don't mind a road version of the waffle ice cream.
and it's not the same, but I live walking distance from a Dairy Queen, so after we record this, I might go
There you
up the
go.
Wizard.
This is switching into an ice cream aficionado case.
I just found the name of the title for the podcast. Thanks, Frank. Ice Cream Aficionado Case. That's a great title for the show. But anyway, guys, look, this was a blast getting to do. Sunday night's going to be a lot of fun. The three of us down there. Follow all of our socials, D underscore Morassutti. But I'm going to let Frank tell the people where can they find you online.
Candid Frank on Twitter.
Sounds good, guys. All the links will be down below. Follow Frank, follow David, follow myself. We'll all be there Sunday. We'll all be there all CFL season long. Gentlemen, this was a blast getting to do, guys. This has been episode 296 of YWC Football Talk. We'll be back very soon because 300 is right around the corner. Enjoy the CFL.